Hello and good day, everyone, and welcome to our virtual event today, Reaching for the Cloud, Getting the Best of Both Worlds, where we're going to talk about how to optimize your environment for what to have on site and what to put into the cloud. And we'd like to thank Unitrends for sponsoring today's event, because without them we wouldn't get to give you this outstanding information. And we're really thrilled to have a great speaker, Subho Guha, with us today. And I'll tell you a little bit more about him in just a couple of minutes. But before we do that, what I'd like to do is help you understand ways to get the most benefit you can from today's event. Now, one of the things I like best about these virtual events is your ability to ask a question or make a comment or an observation. All you have to do is type that into your Ask a Question box, hit Submit, and we'll get to those comments, observations, and most importantly, questions at the end during our live Q&A. Now, the best news of this is if we don't get to your question live due to time constraints, we will get back to you with a written email response. So please take advantage of this. It's a great way to interact with our expert and really a way to get the specific information that helps you get your questions answered. Second, download a PDF copy of today's presentation. There's a lot of great information in here. During our rehearsals, I found it to be a very useful deck. It's a place to take notes. It's something you can electronically send to your colleagues and other people on your team. So take advantage of that. Again, a great persistent reminder to have of today's event. And of course, if you'd like to share or tweet today's event, those social networking tools are supported. And finally, at the very end, we have about a 30-second to 1-minute survey we do where you can tell us how we can make these events the best they can be, because that's really our goal. So again, please take advantage of it. If you can't wait for a response, you can always email information@unitrends.com or call our toll-free number. Also, we'll send you a link to a replay of this webinar within 48 hours, so you can actually go back and review if there's things you'd like to look at. Now just a little bit about our speaker today, because again, I'm thrilled that we have someone with this kind of expertise. Subho is the Vice President of Product Management and Marketing at Unitrends. He's got 24 years plus in this product management area, really understands the key issues, and has been involved with customers at many levels. So he really understands what comes from the R&D labs and what's going on there with what customers need to do. So Subho, I'm going to turn it over to you, and let's get started with the meat of the matter.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. And today I wanted to talk about a very important subject, and more importantly, a trend we're seeing in the marketplace where customers that we talk to, and we've talked to thousands and hundreds of customers, are really looking for how they can optimize their data protection needs. And it's a combination of two things. One is how to optimize their costs and how to operate the environments that they're running today, but more importantly, disaster recovery. In the event of something happening within the four walls, how to ensure that the business runs continuously. So that's the key pain that we hear from our customers. When we look at what we're going to talk about today, I wanted to cover a couple things. One is what we call cloud replicated data protection. Now, I know that's a lot of words, but basically what that means is replication technology where you have data in one location and you're constantly updating and replicating that in another location. It's pretty well known in the IT community. But what I want to talk about is what's really the benefit of adding this technology into your disaster recovery plan. So I want to talk in a little bit about, how does replication work when you're sharing data within a public cloud, or you may have a private cloud in another location. Wanted to kind of discuss some trends that are going on that we're seeing in terms of where is the cloud heading. And what does that mean to the backup and disaster recovery industry? And the other thing I want to talk about is an interesting ecosystem that's emerging with the MSPs, the managed service providers, or the communication service providers and the enterprise. And what does that mean to you? So there's an interesting trend that's going in the marketplace in the cloud space and a lot of dynamics. So let's talk about what's happening today. The key thing that we hear, and we've done several surveys, we talk to customers on a daily basis, the key thing that we hear loud and clear from customers, they really want to eliminate complexity. Customers have an extremely diverse environment. They have physical systems. They have virtual environments. They have a variety of storage options. And they've been thrown various tools to solve their protection needs. They could have solutions that do only virtual only. They could have something that protects the servers, or they can have storage management. And I think especially in the mid-market, customers really want to focus on doing their job, which is to run their business, versus having to focus on a multitude of tools to manage the complexity of managing the environment. So one survey we saw, which was very interesting, says that by 2016, 1/3 of the organizations will change their backup vendors. Now that's pretty dramatic when you think about it, that there's this level of frustration of how they're managing their environment, that they're willing to make that mass of a change. And a lot of that is based on what we call about the big 3 C's: cost, complexity, and capability. And because of the cost and complexity that customers are seeing by using variety tools to do different things, they're really looking for alternative ways to solve the problem. The 4th and 5th C's that we're also adding, what we see based on talking to customer, is really completeness and scale. This goes back to the point that people have disparate tools. They really want a more unified approach of how to be able to manage their heterogeneous environments. And more importantly, they don't really want to focus on how to manage the IT. They're looking to vendors to provide much more superior customer support that can help them manage their environments and tools that they use. So eliminating complexity is definitely a big trend, and various surveys are saying there's a high level of dissatisfaction of the current solutions they have, and are looking for more seamless and unified approaches to solve this. So let's talk about why what's happening in terms of the cloud, and why is that becoming more predominant and more interest, especially in the mid-market, SMBs, as well as in the large enterprises. One of the things customers are starting to see is a blended system where you have a local backup with cloud is becoming much more common. And this allows customers to do a stepwise function of adopting the cloud, where they take advantage of the cloud economies and flexibility, the fact that you can access it anytime, anywhere. But it also adds another layer of management when you're trying to manage the current environment, as well as what you have locally, as well as you're connecting into the cloud. There's also some things you need to be aware of when you're looking at who is going to provide the services. So make sure that you understand the SLAs. You obviously don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. There's also a significant CapEx benefits when you're thinking about the cloud. A lot of mid-sized customers really don't want to spend the money to develop a data center or a secondary site for disaster recovery, hire the people to manage that environment, as well as the whole infrastructure that's required, which is a lot of CapEx in addition to a lot of OpEx too. WAN latency is another issue that you need to consider when it comes to cloud, in terms of what the recovery needs are going to be. So there's various factors here when you're thinking about the cloud. I'm going to talk about the benefits, or kind of the pros and cons, but these are some of the things you need to consider when you're thinking about, when I move to the cloud, what are things I need to be aware of? Now let's talk about what are the different alternative DR methods. And when we talk about DR, the disaster recovery options, as I talked about, a customer has a very heterogeneous environment. We also see a lot of customers who have moved completely to virtual, but typically what we find is customers have a variety of different infrastructure. They will have applications which are on virtual machines, or they can be on physical. They have a multitude of servers, a multitude of storage options in their environment. And typically we call this whole idea of disaster recovery in terms of how you want to do the backup and recovery. It's called this disk to disk to X, and I'll talk about what X is. But basically, you're backing up what you have in your infrastructure to another disk, and then you have the option of where you want to put it into a secondary site. So obviously, you can do the disk to disk through a all-in-one type appliance, which basically allows you to do the entire backup into an integrated appliance with storage, or you can do it on a virtual data protection appliance, which is a more software-based approach, which gives you more flexibility of picking your hardware. So there's pros and cons of that. We can talk about that. But really after that, it's really about where do you then want to store the secondary copy. And that's when we talk about the X. It can be in the cloud. And cloud can have two forms. It could be in a private cloud, which is owned by the company in a secondary location, or it could be in a public cloud. So you can access that from anywhere, anytime. But in both cases, it's seamless access, whether it's owned by the customer or it's in a public cloud that you host it at. You can also back up your secondary data into rotational archiving solutions, which are then taken off to other locations for storage, and you retrieve that. Or you may actually have a storage-based approach, so you're basically doing disk to disk to disk. So there's different options to think about when you think about disaster recovery. But the whole point is a key trend that we advise, and we're hearing loud and clear, data breach and data loss is real. And customers are very seriously thinking about, in the event of disaster, you've got to take things out of your house, meaning you need to have data in different locations. You cannot rely to have everything confined within your four walls. It's becoming paramount among organizations to think of off-site secondary storage, because in the event of a hardware failure, a disaster, your business will shut down if you do not start thinking about disaster recovery. So what I want to talk about is kind of the pros and cons of all these options. So, because the question is, okay, how do you decide which one is best, right? So when you think about disk to cloud, you want to be thinking about, how much CapEx are you going to save, right? As we talked about, do you really want to do it with your IT budget, your infrastructure, putting up a cloud data center? Are you comfortable with the manageability and control of your data if it's going to be in the cloud? Are you able to seed the cloud with any sort of direct access, meaning how are you going to transfer the data? And how quickly can you recover, right? So that's an important thing, right? Can you just spin it up over there so you can see what's going on, or do you have to wait? And how much do you have a trust in your cloud service provider? Because in essence, when you're moving to the cloud, they start becoming your virtual IT function. So there needs to be a high level of trust in who you're going to put your crown jewels of your company, which is your data and information. Do you feel comfortable in terms of who you're going to be working with? There's a trust level in terms of the SLAs and requirements you have. And the other thing is, especially in today's world, there's a lot of requirements for compliance audit of the data, and you want to make sure you're able to do that irrespective of where the data is located, whether it's locally or in the cloud. So these are some important considerations you need to be thinking about when you're thinking about the cloud. As I talked about, one of the considerations as you're thinking about cloud, seeding is very important, right? So, when we talk about seeding so you're basically doing the process of transitioning your data infrastructure that's in your current company location. How quickly can you get your data protected? When you're trying to do it over the wire, it could, pretty much take, several days to weeks to do that, right? So you want to understand what's the best way to be able to kind of seed the data. Do you have any form of direct access to the cloud, right? So for direct uploading, and what happens if your data protecting is in a very rapid pace of change, right? So you'll have to have policy change. The last thing you want to do is be out of date in terms of where you're putting your secondary data, that it's not in sync with what all the changes you're doing on a daily, hourly, or by minute basis. So those are things you need to be questioning. How does your vendor or your service provider provide these capabilities so that you can provide this seeding data strategy in the most seamless and rapid fashion. So how do you decide which is best in terms of these different disk-to-disk considerations, right? So disk-to-disk is really when you're talking about storage, right? So when you're having an attached storage, you really want to talk about, long-term retention, on-premise. You can have storage pools can be extended to accommodate different retention needs. And retention really means is, you want to be able to store data for, a long periods of times, or depending on your needs of when you need to protect, how many periods of time back you want to protect your data. That's really when we talk about retention. And so secondary storage pool can be set up in a DR location, as a replication target, and you're basically mirroring your storage on site with that. And you should want to be able to look at that. The other form of disk-to-disk is rotational drives, which you basically take the data and then you ship it off to basically a vault provider like a Iron Mountain or something that can handle these rotational disks, and you bring it back. So when you look at those rotational archiving considerations, you can have, for example, a pickup and storage service. Iron Mountain is a very popular service that they do. They'll basically take the tapes that you did the backup. They'll take it off-site. You then call them. They bring it back. But you'll also, there's also lots of prone to errors, right? And also recovery times. When you want to make sure you get the right tape back, the right recovery process. So it will require more IT staff on your side to be able to make sure you manage that. It also tends to be not prone to some human errors, because you're really depending on this manual process of where you're backing up to a tape, you're shipping it off-site. You have to make sure you're tracking the different labels of what versions, what you're tracking, and then making sure you're doing the recovery in the right way. So, and for a lot of people that works, right? So, but be aware, there are some pros and cons of the manual process and error handling that could happen with such a process. So let's talk about this whole concept of disaster recovery, as well as now the cloud options. So when we talk about, why cloud is predominant, it's really starting from the premise of customers want to have protection in the event of a disaster, equipment failure, device failures, or hard drive crashes. And you want to be able to have data on-premise as well as off-premise. So you want to be able to have the data kept on-premise so that you have it, you can recover it. You want to be able to back it up very fast. Either security reasons, you keep that on-site. But more importantly, it's about your recovery time objectives as well as recovery point objectives. You want to be able to maximize and optimize your protection on-premise. You then want to have a consideration of the same information at a secondary off-premise location. So you want to be able to replicate off-premise, and you want to then set a recovery objective and SLA in the event of when you're trying to recover, what should that be? So that's really the architecture when we talk about disaster recovery, is to make sure that you're not keeping everything within your on-premise location, but you're constantly replicating at a secondary site. When we talk about secondary site in the cloud, what we recommend as the most optimal solution is a hybrid cloud solution. Now, what does hybrid cloud mean? Hybrid cloud means you have an on-premise continuous process of data protection through a backup appliance, whether it's an all-in-one or software-based appliance. The data is kept on the premise. You have then another source of environment on the cloud where you're constantly replicating what's on-premise to the cloud. So you have a similar set of data on the off-premise location that's continuously updating. Whenever there's a change, you're not constantly just doing a mass update on the off-premise. You just incrementally do the updates of the changes between the on and off-premise, which is in the cloud. This ensures that you're constantly updating very quickly in the off-premise, but also it allows you to make sure that you have a standing live data set at a secondary location in the cloud, which will meet your recovery objectives. This also allows you to minimize outage and unplanned downtime because you always have access to this offsite location. So recovering from real disasters. So no matter which disaster recovery method you choose, right, disk to disk to disk, disk to disk to the cloud, putting it onto rotational drives and then shipping it off to third-party services, the name of the game is not so much about backup, it's really about recovery. So how fast can you recover your data? How fast can you recover your system? And how quickly can you recover your premise in the event of disaster? A lot of customers do understand that in the event of a disaster, it's going to take time to recover the infrastructure and all the processes within your four walls. So the benefit of the cloud, because it has that anytime, anywhere access, what customers really want is the ability to be able to go to the cloud and run their environment as if it was locally. So the whole idea is you want that instant on capability so you're able to go and recover from the cloud. So what did we learn so far? So the key thing is, I keep telling when I talk to my customers and they tell us, get the data out of the house. So backup recovery and disaster recovery are really converging to one automated process. So backup recovery, which traditionally had been a local-based process, is really extending into a disaster recovery process where you have to kind of look at local to a secondary site process into an automated process. You have to really choose a method which is optimal for your environment, whether the considerations are cost, time to recover, or in terms of total ways of how you want to manage your business. It also matters in terms of how much data you have, right, to be considering your savings you're going to have, whether you move to a disk-based locally or you want to move to a secondary site-based cloud option. Our recommendation in terms of what we see the best benefit, that you can have the fastest time to back up your current data and information and be able to have real-time access of your secondary data location is a hybrid cloud approach. We believe an on-premise, off-premise, and hybrid approach to disaster recovery truly is where the market is moving and the best approach to kind of meet the best of your both worlds of on-site needs as well as in the event of recovery needs for disasters. So what's driving this change? Why are customers kind of seriously looking at these different options of local to secondary site type options? Tighter data protection requirements, application-based RPO, recovery point objectives, and recovery time objectives. The demand to making sure that you have those available and be able to protect. I mean, we've seen survey after survey where the cost of data loss is very, very real, especially if you're in industries like healthcare, financial services. It could be disastrous to your bottom line when in the event of data. You hear horror stories where you have health services go down, where you have financial services go down. You do not want to do that, right? You want to have much more tighter data protection requirements. You also want to be able to get data on a longer-term retention basis to protect the data and recover it. In our industry we call it a good problem. Data is just exponentially growing because that's really what's driving in the whole idea of this whole electronic e-commerce as well as internet world. The amount of data that's proliferating, digital data, is just proliferating in leaps and bounds. We expect 20 to 40x increases, continuously on the data, but being able to manage that continuously is going to be important. I think what's also driving the change is the comfort level of customers of technologies that are now available for cloud computing and cloud storage is increasing the comfort level of some of the concerns that were in the past, whether it be security related, performance, more importantly, the economies. Does it make sense to kind of put things on the cloud? A lot of technology advancements in the last 10 years have driven a lot of resolution of some of these concerns of the past, and so that's why we're seeing a lot more bigger adoption around the cloud computing and cloud storage environments. So while you're accommodating this change, or you're considering this change to move to the cloud and moving towards this journey of how you can become more resilient and higher levels of protection on and off premise, keep the basics in view. It's all about what is going to drive your business requirements. What is your service level that you can tolerate? What is your recovery time requirements? You're making sure that you're going to be able to do and pass all your compliance requirements. You're going to have to make sure that you look at your IT staff goals, right? So as we talked about with the cloud, you can radically rethink how you're currently staffing versus what you want to staff if you want to offload some of the capabilities from your on-premise and in a more load balance what you do on-site versus what you want to share within the cloud. At the end of the day, it's all about economics, right? You're trying to run your business at the most optimal cost, so knowing your budget is important. You want to understand your IT assets in terms of what you have, your physical and virtual. And as we talked about, there's such a discomfort today with the current backup tools where you have a variety. You want more unified approaches to do this. Though number one, we talk about forget your tools, focus on your disaster recovery plan first. So in the event of a disaster recovery, what is going to be the process? What are going to be your business objectives? What are the metrics you need to recover that will make sure that complies with your business goals? And you want to continuously test to that. And then when you have those objectives, that will also help you make sure that when you're selecting the right option for the disaster recovery-based solutions to the cloud, you're picking the right vendor, the right solution, but more importantly, adapting to your plan. So at Unitrends, we talk about this in terms of our solutions are all cloud connected. We provide the solution to provide this best of both worlds, meaning we understand that customers' environments are extremely heterogeneous. So we have solutions that support physical, virtual, as well as a variety of different system requirements. We provide capabilities to solve their current on-site backup and restore solutions with two options. One could be a completely fully integrated all-in-one hardware appliance, which includes the backup software, the adequate amount of storage, and you really don't have to worry about in terms of how you need to do it. It's completely self-contained, and that allows you to manage the amount of storage you have. In certain instances, we also see customers prefer to go the software route. So we also provide software virtual appliances, which allows you to back up your physical and virtual environments. But more importantly, these are all cloud connected. So whatever you manage and restore and back up on your local infrastructure on premises, we allow them to be replicated into the cloud. We call this a unified approach, and it's a very sophisticated unified data protection approach. We have this all-in-one data protection solution. The whole idea is to be simply scalable. So we have the options to have subscription-based options where, based on how much data, and for our solutions, we also provide the capability where it's unlimited. You tell us the total amount of storage you want to store. So for example, if you pick our highest end solution, which is our Recovery Series 943, you want to store up to 60 terabytes, for example. We don't charge you and nickel and dime you for every gig that you're putting up. It's unlimited to the capacity of the appliance that's solving all your backup needs. We have a unified software approach to make sure it's integrated within our hardware, as well as to be flexible across any virtual environments, whether it be Hyper-V, VMware, vSphere type environments, as well as physical. The unified hardware allows you to kind of have a completely integrated software and hardware solution, so you don't have to worry about what the hardware is. And the whole premise of all this is to really have that ultimate data protection in the event of a disaster. So to ensure that we're constantly replicating all the data that you have on premise and be able to replicate that incrementally in the cloud and then be able to recover it. As we talked about, heterogeneity is very, very important. And why is that important? When we talked about at the beginning, people are getting frustrated with multiple tools. Our solution really solves all your needs with one tool, right? So to be able to scale as your data grows, but not have to worry about, can I manage your physical, can I manage your virtual, being able to do that with one unified solution. And the most important thing is simplicity. We understand you want to focus on your business. What we don't want you to become is data management experts and having to understand complex software and tools. We want you to have a capability that allows you to focus on what you're trying to protect, get the system up and running, connect it into the cloud, and be able to then worry about your procedures and processes versus how to manage a tool. So when we look at our portfolio, we talked about this whole hybrid approach. So we have shrink-wrapped enterprise-class appliances and software which are connected into the cloud. We have on-premise solutions. As we talked about, we protect heterogeneous environments in a variety of needs, whether it's applications, physical, virtual, variety of storage options, SAN, NAS, or DAS. We then have the physical and virtual appliances, which are basically connected into those environments that you're trying to protect. So we have the physical backup appliance, which is an all-in-one solution of software and hardware. You don't really have to, once you have it turned on, it basically protects that heterogeneous environment. Or we have the enterprise backup solution, which is a software-based virtual appliance, which can solve your virtual protection as well as your physical protection. So kind of it's a flexibility of option. We then provide some unique capabilities in the archiving, based on the discussion we have, right? Do you want to do disk to tape or disk? We have that local archiving capability if that is your route for your secondary storage. But as we talked about, more and more what we see the trend for customers wanting to be able to have access to the cloud, we now have a full cloud capability connected to your on-site, which allows you to have the same retention of your data that you have locally. You're able to replicate that data on a continuous basis. But more importantly, as our offers increase over time, you'll be able to spin up your environment in the cloud. Now, why is that beneficial? Basically, what that allows you to do, if, for example, there's a crash or in the event of disaster recovery, or you're just doing maintenance of what's out there in the cloud, you'll be able to do disaster recovery as a service in the cloud, be able to spin up the virtual machines or the applications that you have in the cloud. As if you're running your IT locally, you will be able to do that in the cloud. So that ensures you that whole idea we talked about, it's all about how fast you can recover, you're comfortable, you can get to the point that you need to recover to. And so those are the capabilities that will allow you to have the best of both worlds, where you can protect what you need to do in a more unified, simplified fashion, but you also have a secondary solution on the cloud, which is highly, highly scalable at a very affordable price. And you don't have to spend all the IT to build out your whole data center. You don't have to have the IT staff to manage that. You really have completely reduced your capital and OpEx costs to make sure that you have a disaster recovery plan in place. So hopefully that helps you understand the journey to the cloud. Some of you are already there. Some of you are contemplating moving to the cloud. And hopefully this webinar provides a guidance in terms of things you need to be considering in terms of moving to the cloud and the different options. But more importantly, focus on your business. And Unitrends really is a market leader in terms of providing the capabilities. Think about cloud-connected options. So our goal is to make sure that we're looking at this continuous process from on-premise to off, and then providing this completely integrated solution to think about that we're protecting what you have in-house, as well as in the event of disaster or in the event of maintenance, you're able to recover instantly, so you can, you have a safe IT. So the whole idea is to play it safe, right? You want to make sure you can sleep well at night, that you have a good disaster recovery plan in place, and it's completely automated. So just to conclude on that, I would obviously recommend you reach out to us in terms of if you'd like to get tech demos. We do that continuously. If you go to our website at unitrends.com, you'll see links to kind of getting a tech demo. We have some trials that we would like you to consider for the software solution that can be easily downloaded. But more importantly, I really wanted to appreciate your time to listen to us, to understand where we're seeing the market moving towards the cloud. As Aaron had mentioned, some of the information in the front, I want to repeat that. If you have any questions, please contact us. Here's some emails here, whether it's info or sales. But I'm going to hand it over to Aaron for any other housekeeping and any of the question Q&A. So Aaron?
All right. Well, thanks very much. Really appreciate that, Sue. Some excellent stuff. And I think, for our audience, the ability to get that specific detail, to have the clarity is really so valuable. So we're going to move to our questions here. And again, if you have questions, you can still submit them. There's always room for more. So we're going to start getting to those. And one other thing, under the Downloads button, you can find a number of white papers that I think will help you as well. Do take advantage of that, because those white papers are going to help you get the information you need to start choosing the right options and looking at the options and understanding what decisions to make that are most effective for your organization. So I'm going to start with our first question here from Chris, which is it's a great one. How long would it take to recover a system if you're backing up to the cloud? Now, I know that's probably, Subo, going to depend on how big the backup is, but maybe you can give us some sense.
Yeah, so in terms of how much can you back up, and that it all depends on the size and what you're trying to do. The most important thing is when you're doing in the cloud, the size, probably a pun here, size doesn't matter in that per se, right? Because you have kind of a unlimited storage on the cloud that you're trying to do. But once you have that stored in the cloud, the time it takes to get to the point of recovery is one question, right? In terms of there's a time to kind of recover that. But typically a lot of these things are instant, right? You're able to kind of recover the virtual machine that you have on. And that's one of the things you want to understand from your customer, from the vendors you're evaluating, right? How quickly can you recover, for example, and can you do their terms we call spin up, right? Can you spin up a virtual machine instantly in the cloud, versus you have to wait until the vendor can back up to a time, and they're going to ship you back something. So there's different ways to do it. So it's really a question of how much is it automated and you can real-time access versus the different technologies they're using. All right.
A question here from Paul, and Paul actually I think has a very good question from a tactical perspective, Suo, which is your reference to continuous protection. Is this real-time replication or periodic, every 15 minutes or so snapshots?
Yeah, so it depends. That's an excellent question, right? So you can schedule the replication or you can do continuous. Our software is extremely flexible to be able to determine your needs. A lot of customers, there's also a bandwidth discussion. So we understand that since you're connecting from your on-premise to the cloud, you probably have a network and you have different capabilities of your network. And we understand that we don't just have a fast pipe from the local premise to the cloud, and you don't want to hog up your network bandwidth either, because you're probably doing business from your network and you don't want to take all your time up in terms of that backup flow that's happening in replication to other needs you have. So we provide the flexibility. You can do it based on a periodic basis or you can do it on instant. It completely depends on what capabilities you have. And what we try to do is we try to understand your characteristics of your infrastructure and recommend the different ways to do it, whether you should do it more continuous or more on a maintenance base on a periodic basis. So it all depends on what you have, and we adjust it to make sure it doesn't disrupt your business.
Stubo, wouldn't it depend too on the application load? For a highly transaction-oriented industry where you had to capture every transaction, that might impact whether you do continuous or periodic snapshots. Those would come into play too, wouldn't it?
Exactly. So that's one is how much can you afford to do continuous versus that, and then there would be some things that are more highly sensitive. You want to make sure that the other thing that you bring up is also the frequency of change. So if there's a high frequency of change, you probably want to do a more faster replication, or if it's an application that has more high sensitivity, and you want to make sure it's always updated more quicker. It all depends on your business needs. So absolutely, good point.
All right. I get a question here from a number of people. I'm going to kind of do a mashup here, which is questions about what kind of traffic is going to be seen in doing cloud-based backup across the network, if there's some way to kind of quantify that. I know, again, it depends, but maybe you can give us some guidelines.
So could you repeat that question again in terms of?
It's what kind of traffic are we going to see generated across the network to do this cloud-based backup?
Yeah, so as I talked about, right, I can't give you exact metrics because it's very specific on how much of data and how fast you want to do it. So, I don't expect everyone to have T1 links, right, for example, right, if you're a small business or you're medium. So the advantage really to think about it is if you're like multi-terabyte, we're not talking about you're going to be passing that through and then just sitting idly waiting for that to happen. That would take you weeks and months. What we try to do is rapidly take a copy of what you have locally. We put that on the cloud in the most fastest appropriate way to do that. And then when you have both sides running, you're just continuously replicating. But you're only replicating changes that you've made. So you're not doing a mass traffic transfer. You're only doing incremental changes, and that's what we talk about, continuous incremental changes. So you're basically doing incremental replication as well as compression of the data that's going between. So it doesn't take up as much traffic than saying if you had to just do all the multi-terabytes of data that has to be transferred over to the cloud.
All right. I've got a question here from Andy, which is a really good one. Is data dedupe being utilized, or can it be utilized?
Yes, absolutely. So in the world of disaster recovery, there's two considerations, right? We talked about it's all about recovery, but it's also about your storage cost, right? So for folks who don't know, deduplication is absolutely critical, right? You want to make sure you're optimizing how much data you have to store, right? And you don't want to continuously, another example is I have a Mac, right? And I use a time capsule. The thing I hated with some of the old technologies was you would continuously back up all your gigabytes of data every time. And it would just take so much time to do it. With dedupe technologies as well as other compression technologies, you're only passing on data of the changes that you're doing. And we provide an adaptive deduplication technology, which allows you to do it inline as well as after the fact when it's at the target. So we definitely leverage a lot of the technologies to optimize your storage needs. We do deduplication technologies, but then we also ensure there's security, which is kind of counter to dedupe with encryption technologies to make sure that data is safe. But absolutely, yes. That's an excellent question. When you're looking at vendors, you want to ask in terms of how they do deduplication, because that allows you to also minimize the amount of storage you need, because that is a cost factor.
All right. That's a great answer. I've got another question, Sue, and I'm going to kind of do the old mashup routine on. It seems like I'm a part disc jockey today. Well, that would be a very antiquated term. But it's a question of, is a dedicated circuit necessary, really, to support the cloud option, or can you do it without one?
So when you just make sure I understand the question, is there necessary to have a dedicated on-site appliance? Could you just repeat that just to make sure I understand?
No, a dedicated circuit, bandwidth to the cloud.
No, not necessarily. that would be preferred to have a dedicated pipe. And again, that depends on the amount of data that you have and how much you're trying to put into the cloud. If you had a dedicated line to do that, that's great. Obviously, that's going to improve the time to replicate. But a lot of our customers can't afford that, right? So they basically have different networking options, and that's one of the things we do work. Our system consultants will kind of look at what you have, look at your budget, and we could recommend different ways of either leveraging what your current infrastructure, or if you wanted to do that. So it's not necessary, but obviously if you can, you're going to have a much more faster capability to transfer data.
All right. I've got a question from George. This is a good one because I think it is the real world. So they've got a very mixed IT environment, numerous vendors. Will Unitrends work in that environment?
Yeah, absolutely. As we talked about, right, one of the things that customers are just extremely frustrated is they have a tool to do backup and recovery of virtual. They have a tool to do physical. They're just tired of these multiple tools because it's a lot of operational cost and being able to manage, and more important, it's complexity. So with Unitrends, one of the things we've clearly understood is customers' environments are extremely heterogeneous. We need to provide the capability to be heterogeneous. So we support hundreds and hundreds of environments for physical. We support Hyper-V as well as VMware. With our other solutions, with our PhD virtual backup, we also support Citrix. So we're extremely heterogeneous, and we want to have one tool to manage the environment versus having you to learn multiple tools to do that. So the answer is absolutely yes.
All right. Well, Subo, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank Unitrends, too, because the sponsorship of events like these where we can get to the real world, the good advice, the knowledge that comes from working across hundreds or thousands of implementations is so valuable to IT professionals who are really trying to make the right and most effective decisions. So I want to thank you personally and thank your organization so much today. And I just want to remind the audience a couple things before we leave. First is don't forget to download a copy of the presentation. Again, some great information here. I think it's really, really useful for you to have. It's not a big file. Do take advantage of that. And also take advantage of downloading those white papers in the downloads area. Second, we really appreciate your feedback. So if you could take less than a minute and complete our survey, we do appreciate that. We want to be sensitive and value your time in the audience and give you the best events that these can be. Third, there'll be a recorded version of the seminar available within 24 hours at www.eseminarslive.com. So you'll have a chance to go back and review anything you might have missed or get, rehear a part that you may have not been able to get fully the first time. You can also see other events that Unitrends has sponsored, and they will be there as well. So again, don't forget to go to www.eseminarslive.com. So this is Aaron Goldberg. I want to thank everyone for the time, and again, thanks to Unitrends for sponsoring today's event. Have a great day, and for those of you in the Northeast like I am, stay warm.